We're talking with Phil Purcell from Dave Wilson Nursery. We're getting the lowdown about the plants that are arriving at your local nurseries or will be arriving soon. Berry plants, fruit trees, and so much more. We talked about blueberries, Phil, last time. Let's talk about blackberries. A lot of great blackberry varieties. These plants get a little bigger, though, than blueberry plants, and so they probably need some sort of a trellis system.
Blackberries, everyone sees them on the roadside where they kind of take over the whole area. So they are a sprawling vine, and they do need support. With the blackberry, except for one of the bush-home berries, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But generally speaking, blackberries need to go into the ground, and it's going to need a little bit of area to cover to produce.
Now, what about blackberries and the need for multiple varieties? Are they like blueberries? If you plant more than one blackberry variety, will that increase fruit production?
Blackberries are pretty much self-fruitful, but like we said with the blueberries, if you can get other varieties out there, you can get cross-pollination, your yield will just increase substantially.
The nice thing about blackberries is these are large, extra firm berries, great flavor, great on cereal in the morning. If you adapt a care schedule, shall we put it, early on in your blackberry existence, you can keep them fairly well under control. One place with really good information is called the California Garden Web. It's produced by the University of California Ag and Natural Resources Department. And if you look up the information called Growing Berries in Your Backyard, they have some excellent advice about pruning blackberries. If you have trailing blackberries during the first growing season, use the trellis to support the new canes growing from the plant crowns. Tie or wrap the canes around the wires, and these canes will bloom and produce the first crop the following spring. In the spring, trailing blackberries produce vigorous shoots called primocanes, and those grow along the ground. Keep those trained on the ground beneath the bearing canes to prevent injury. At the same time, the 2-year-old canes, which are called floricanes, which grew the previous season and are trained on the trellis, will bloom and produce the first crop. Right after harvest, cut off all of the floricanes near the ground and remove them from the trellis, leaving 8 to 12 of the sturdiest primocanes on each plant to bear fruit the next spring. Wrap the primocanes around the trellis, from which all of the floricanes have been removed. Wrap 1 or 2 primocanes at a time in a spiral around the wires of the trellis, working each way from the plant. All other canes are cut back to the ground. Each year, primocanes should be cut back or headed to 8 to 10 feet long. Heading the canes forces lateral shoot growth that bears next year's crop. For erect blackberries, erect types produce stiff, upright new canes, the primocanes from the crown that arch over after they grow about 5 to 6 feet long. During the growing season, when the primocanes are approximately 3 feet tall, pinch off the top 1 to 2 inches. These canes will produce branches that will produce fruit the next year. Alternatively, the canes can be left unheaded and wrapped around the wires for fruiting next year. Then immediately after harvest, remove the floricanes. Thin the primocanes to 3 or 4 of the strongest canes per plant. And again, you can find this information. I know that sounded confusing, but you can find it spelled out very easily at the UCANR webpage called California Garden Web, and look for the page entitled Growing Berries in Your Backyard. Now, one simple trick that works for a lot of people, pay attention to those canes that bear fruit. And mark that cane, either with some light paint or maybe tie a little ribbon around it. That way you know which canes to remove at the end of the season, because those canes won't produce again. One thing that makes pruning blackberries much easier is choosing thornless blackberries. And there's some really tasty thornless blackberry varieties out there. And I think Dave Wilson probably has the black satin thornless.
We do. Yeah, we have triple crown. And very good point. The commercial blackberry growers, they're able to harvest what we call thorny blackberries. We do grow thorny blackberries for the home garden market. By far, the homeowner is now looking for thornless blackberries because it's just easy to harvest. You don't have to worry about scratching yourself or any type of danger. So the trend now is for the backyard to to go with thornless varieties. We even have a thornless boysenberry. And there's some really good varieties, like you said, Crown, Black Satin, Chester, that, will give you plenty of fruit. And then you don't have the inconvenience of thorns out there. But at the same time, we still have Marionberries, Malala berries, people who grew up with those. And, those have thorns. It's just a little more challenging to harvest the fruit.
Yeah, I was looking at the sizes of the berries on these thornless varieties. The Black Satin thornless blackberry has large berries that can get up to 2 inches long. And that Triple Crown thornless blackberry basically can produce, 30 pounds of fruit per vine? It
does, yeah. So they're heavy producers. That's what makes them ideal for the home gardener, is that they're thornless. There's nothing like picking the blackberries right when you want it, as opposed to getting them in the container. And if you don't eat them all at the same time, they can start molding out. But, 30 pounds is generally enough for, family of 5 or 6, and with plenty of blackberries.
And they don't all ripen at the same time either, do they?
They don't. So that's just it. It's all about, think about it for your edible garden. Successive ripening. You don't want everything ripening at the same time.
Exactly. A lot of great blackberry varieties. And the good news, too, is after you harvest them, they will last in the refrigerator for, a week or two?
They do. And then there's a new variety out. It's put out by Bushel and Berry, and it's called Baby Cake. So let's say, if you're you have a small garden, but you don't have room for a vine blackberry, this variety is a self-fertile bush variety of blackberry. It's perfect to put in a container along with your blueberries and such. It's, it'll give you not a ton of fruit, but it'll give you some fruit and something interesting to put in the container. And you don't have to worry about the sprawling vine because it grows as a small little bush.
Yeah, exactly. So, what is it, like 3 to 4 feet?
It is. Yeah. So it's, there are now blackberries for all different types of, homeowners, whether you're, in a smaller condominium or apartment, or, even, I have bush blackberries in pots in my yard, and I have a regular sized yard. It's just something I don't have to worry about it getting out of control. And it gives me, blackberries and, some interest out in the patio.
We should point out, too, blackberries are widely adaptable, too. There isn't much in the way of chill hour requirements for most blackberry varieties, is there?
There isn't. When you say adaptable, that's a great way of saying, these blackberries, because it's low chill, doesn't mean that it doesn't do well in a high chill area. Low chill, so you can do it, you can do it even in Florida or Southern California, or need be, you can do it in the upper Midwest. So that's the nice thing about blackberries is, they're very, very adaptable.
We're here at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center in the wintertime, and without leaves, you can really see structures that work. And I'm looking at a blackberry setup, a way to grow blackberries that I find really interesting, and I think for a lot of people it would be a great way to do it at home. It involves growing blackberries in containers, but with an excellent trellising and watering system. We're talking with Master Gardener Tamara Engel. And Tamara, tell us a little bit about this system for blackberries. You have 4, different blackberry varieties here, and they're being grown in half barrels.
Yes, they're being grown in half barrels, which blackberries grow really well in barrels. That's not a problem at all for them. So it's a great way to do it if you don't have the space directly in your ground. They like nice organic soil, so that works great. And then as a really simple irrigation hose that comes across and allows them to get the water that they need. So that's another easy way to do it. So you don't have to do anything underground. It's just a drip system hose.
Well, let's go into a bit of detail about the barrels, the soil. What I really like about the half barrels is I bet there's really good drainage because these barrels are not resting on the ground. You have them on some pretty sizable stones or bricks that are 4 to 6 inches high, and so that means that the holes in the bottom of the barrel aren't going to get clogged probably. And the drip system too, these are sizable drip tubes. This isn't your standard half-inch tubing. This looks to be like 3/4 or maybe even 1 inch, and it looks to be you got 2 parallel drip lines running the length of this trellising system going across 4 different half barrels. There are 2 emitters per line, which means a total of 4 emitters per barrel. And I'm just guessing here, are those 1 gallon emitters or 2 gallon emitters?
I'm not sure if they're 1 gallon or 2 gallon.
But basically, this is a good way to go about it.
Yes.
The soil in here, you mentioned, is organic soil, or at least made up of organic ingredients.
A lot of organic matter. Berries do like things to be a little bit on the acidic side, and giving them a nice start with nice mixed organic material is the way to give them a good start in life.
Really, I know for blueberries, a good mix that can get the pH down to 5.5, which might be a little too low for blackberries, would be a mix of well-saturated peat moss, perhaps some small bark, and of course a camellia, azalea, rhododendron soil mix, which tends to be on the acidic side. So if you're looking for a premix, that's one way to go about it. All right, let's talk about the supports for this. Now, this is what I really like, is the fact that you have a trellising system with 2 4x4s that are vertical, and they stand about 7 feet tall. And then you've got 2x4s attached to 2 points, one about, I'd say, 2 feet from the ground, and the one about 5-6 feet from the ground. And you've got wires. These are strong, I'd say 12-gauge wires on turnbuckles that go across, and you've got the wires going from the top of the barrel. The first wire is about 18 inches from the top of the barrel. The next wire up going across the middle of the barrel is probably 4.5, 5 feet. And then there's 2 more, but spaced a little closer together, 1 foot apart. So the tallest wire maxes out at about 7 feet or so. So that gives you a vertical area to tie the vines to. And then at the end of the 2x4s, and these 2x4s are probably about 3.5 feet long that are attached horizontally at the 2 points I mentioned, you've got 2 more wires coming out of them and running the length of the bed. And I would think with a system like this, and the fact that these 4x4s are embedded in concrete, this ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, no, this isn't going anywhere, as you said. So we have a similar setup at home, except our berries are in a raised bed instead of in individual pots, but we have almost the exact same trellis system. And a couple things I want to point out about it that I think are really helpful. This one, as you said, it's really stabilized by the fact that it's in concrete. There's also a giant metal pole that looks like almost like a closet rod going from between the two end posts, and that keeps those from falling over. And then you mentioned the turnbuckles as well, which is really helpful because, as you can imagine, over time, as these things start to weigh down the wires, being able to tighten or loosen those wires is pretty key. So we have that similar setup at home. And right now all the berries are pruned back so you can see the whole setup very clearly. But when they get going, especially if you get a little bit lazy about pruning, like some of us always do, this will fill up completely with these vines. And it's a really good stable support system. It keeps the berries up off the ground, which is always nicer, when you're harvesting, so you don't have everything hanging over on the ground. And then the other great thing about this system here at the Horticulture Center is this allows us, when we have those really screaming hot days in the summer and these are in full sun, we can put shade cloth over them when the berries are really ripe. While the berries do enjoy full sun, we find that when they're just about ripe and they're getting too much blast of a sun or those hot windy days, it can actually cause the berries to dry out just before you get to pick them, which is always a drag. So we put some shade cloth up over here on those peak hot days.
Yeah, that would be easy to do because it's all within easy reach, and because of the length of these 2x4 crossbars, it would drape over the entire plant very easily. I'm glad you mentioned this galvanized 1-inch steel pipe that is running at about 5.5 feet tall from one vertical support to the other. And we should point out that this area is probably 3, 6, 9, 12, maybe 14 or 15 feet long.
Yep.
And that galvanized steel pipe does an excellent job of supporting the supports so that when the turnbuckles and the weight of the branches won't cause these to fold in.
Exactly.
So that's really nice. But you got that interesting in a hole on either side. So
yes.
You had to put one in, and then bring up the support for the other to put it in?
You know, I hate to say it, Fred, but I wasn't here when they built this one, and the one we have at home does not have that feature, so I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm assuming that's how they did it.
Yeah. Tamara Engel, we've learned a lot about how to support blackberries. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Fred.